Hi, I'm Nat.
And I'm Guy. And we got a lot of political news tonight. Before we get to that, we'll talk a little bit of pop culture. We got Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. They just renewed their Netflix deal. And I want to talk a little bit about Jon Jones, kind of not wanting to fight for the heavyweight championship. We don't have an article on it. It was kind of breaking right before we went on air. I was watching a segment about it. But let's get to Meghan Markle and Prince Harry first.
Sure. So Prince Harry and Meghan Markle extend their Netflix deal. And we had reported that they weren't going to, but...
And it wasn't just us that reported it. I shamefully keep up on a lot of Meghan Markle channels because we report on her a lot, because a lot of viewers tune in when we do report on her. Yeah. And almost every channel for the past year consistently was talking about how her and Netflix were dividing. A bigger and bigger chasm was forming. They did not want anything to do with them. Somehow they managed to renew this deal. I had speculated that perhaps if they didn't renew this deal, this was going to be a huge black eye on them and no other studio would want to work with them. So maybe they went for an absolute dirt cheap price.
Yeah.
But I don't know that, and I haven't been able to figure out the actual price of the contract.
Or how or why.
Yeah.
So let's see. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, although that name is debatable, have extended their Netflix partnership with a multi-year first-look deal via their banner Archwell Productions. The couple first inked a deal with a streamer in 2020 and have since collaborated on projects including Polo, Meghan and Harry, Heart of Invictus, Live to Lead. Most recently, Markle debuted her lifestyle series with Love Meghan, the second season of which premieres later this month. Along with the series, she launched the brand As Ever, which will continue to grow in partnership with Netflix.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting. What's your speculation on this? I mean, this kind of came out of nowhere. I was surprised to see the news today. When I seen Meghan Markle Netflix on some other people's thumbnails talking about this news, I was expecting it was a pure cancellation, and it was exactly the opposite. She now has a holiday special, which I think nobody wants to see her in. The ratings haven't been good for anything they've had.
And as we reported before, part of the Netflix deal, and as it says here, is that brand As Ever, which I'm guessing Netflix did invest quite a bit of money into and sank quite a bit of money into. And even though they did run out of a lot of products and even had a lot of issues with their website, maybe they considered that valuable enough to kind of continue on. I don't know.
Maybe. Maybe, I mean, they've sunk a lot of money into the branding, a lot of money into the show. Maybe I would say the smartest move would to cut ties with them, but maybe try to pass on the show before they do. But I even think anybody that comes on the show to kind of take over the show, just associating with Markle is not a good look for anybody right now. I also speculated on my morning show that perhaps it could have been politics. Progressive politics could be rearing its head here. Maybe Netflix wants to hedge its bets, not just have conservative content, but have a lot of progressive content like they had in the past. Meghan and Harry, yes, they're progressive, but they're not ultra woke progressive to the general public anyway. So this is a way to kind of put a little bit over here, a little bit over here, and kind of see what happens after this administration is done.
Maybe. I think it's more that Netflix feels like they've just invested too much into it. And I mean, even though the shows, I mean, yes, some of them did okay, but at the end, when the rankings came out, they were all the way at the bottom. So
yeah, I don't know anybody that actually watched the show. I would watch segments just for research for our show, but yeah. Maybe we can talk a little bit about Jon Jones, and I know we don't have an article, so I'll kind of make this brief.
Talk about it.
But Jon Jones was the previous heavyweight champion in the UFC. The UFC just inked a $7 billion deal. That being said, right before he retired, he was supposed to fight the current heavyweight champion, which is now Tom Aspinall. A lot of people said he ducked and dodged him. That being said, it seems that Jon Jones wanted to make heavyweight boxing money, so that was like 20 to 25 million. He put a number he thought the UFC wouldn't negotiate on or wouldn't provide him with, which was $30 million. $30 million is a lot of money. The UFC's never paid even near that. The UFC actually considered it decided to go to Saudi Arabia to get some alternative investment to actually pay Jon Jones that money. The Saudis had agreed to it. They went back to Jon Jones and said, we got the $30 million. We'll pay you up front. Jon Jones said, okay, thought about it for a few days after he had already said okay, and then said, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to stay retired. So it's not that the matchup can't emerge at UFC White House. That's where it's expected. If it does happen, it will happen. But if Jon Jones wants to be considered the greatest of all time, he really needs that fight now. And they're willing to pay him the money. So he's got no excuse other than the fact maybe he doesn't want to tarnish his legacy. Okay, that's it.
I have no idea what you're talking about, so okay.
That's it for the UFC news. Let's go into the politics of the day now.
Yes, so, hold on. From Brian Gertison, nothing screams military might more than a decarbonized war machine. Carney is going to drop $4.2 billion decarbonizing the Canadian military. What an obscene waste of money. I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, I don't exactly know what I kind of do because I was trying to research this. This broke just before we went on the air as well. This being said, I usually bury Canadian news a little bit further into the segment, but I thought this was huge. There's a total of a $9 billion investment that Carney's going to make, mainly because he was pressured by Trump. $4.2 billion of that, which is more than half of that, is going to be going for green projects to make the military green. And I think they're doing a lot of the shell maneuvers that the EU is doing too. They're saying they're investing billions of dollars into the military when really they're earmarking infrastructure projects such as bridges and electrical plants, nuclear plants as military spending when it's not actually military spending. And they're trying to tell Trump and placate Trump that they are spending that money when they're not. That being said, this is a slap in the face of Canadians. They're investing $4.2 billion primarily in green sector energy is what my investigation kind of concluded. Now, this was only a few minutes before we went on air. Rebel News kind of broke the story, but it looks like he's trying to invest in green energy. Green energy in Canada, number one, doesn't work. It's a cold weather country. Number two, they consistently lost money on all their green energy investments. So, I mean, China's the world leader in green energy because they don't have any environmental sanctions on them. So they can produce solar cells, wind turbines, and things like this without having to worry about recycling or the waste byproducts.
So should we watch it?
Yeah, let's watch a little bit. And hopefully this is the right one.
Okay.
Because there was one with Rebel News. I don't think this was it, actually.
Okay, let's see. Because this is quite long, but...
Mark, Carney says he's boosting...
Pause it. Yeah, we're just going to watch a couple minutes of it. She kind of wraps it up fairly quickly in the beginning here.
And go follow Rebel News as well, Canadian independent media.
Defense spending, $8 billion more for Canada's military. But here's the catch. Half of that increase, about $4.2 billion, is being flushed down the drain on climate vanity projects. Not weapons, not gear, not housing or retention, just woke climate reparations paid in carbon credits and solar panels. And we have the documents to prove it.
In those circumstances from
And pause it for just a sec. And I think once Donald Trump catches wind of this and realizes that not only Canada's placating him, but a lot of the EU is starting to placate him, saying, yeah, we're investing billions of dollars. They're just investing in their own infrastructure. That's why when these Russia negotiations come up next week, it's very important that Donald Trump gets the EU to take over that war. If they want to fight that war, that's their war. He'll sell them the weapons, but they got to do the rest. They got to find the money for the weapons. They're going to need to find the soldiers. It's going to be their war going forward. He's got too many problems on a global basis, from Israel to Iran to possibly China and other regions around the world. He needs regional partners that can step up militarily. Obviously, these military partners are saying they're willing to do that with billion-dollar investments, but really, they're just placating them and investing in their own infrastructure.
To Juno, that the world came to know the value of our strength. But now we're working alongside the European Union to combat climate change, to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, and to protect, amongst other things, academic and scientific freedoms. In these ways, the world knows the strength of our values.
Okay, and pause it one more moment. This being said, there's this huge movement within Canada. Mark Carney is a pure globalist through and through. He's actually one of the masterminds that is kind of making the infrastructure and the web for this green economy that is quickly falling apart because Donald Trump is throwing a monkey wrench into this. But he doesn't want to become the 51st state because that would mean the end of his globalist dream. There is a lot of talk and a lot of I would say false stories being pushed into Canadian media right now as propaganda saying Canadians want to join the EU. Canada wants to be part of the EU. Canada's already part of NATO. What's the polling like of becoming part of the EU? I think Mark Carney's thinking if they join the EU, that will prevent them from having to join America as the 51st state, or maybe stop Alberta from breaking off and becoming its own independent state or a 51st state.
Do you want to keep watching it?
Yeah, let's keep going. They're going to reveal the documents right here.
Is it still your expectation that NATO countries spend 5% of their GDP on defense spending? I think they should do that. I don't think we should, but I think they should. We've been supporting NATO so long. In many cases, I believe paying almost 100% the cost. So I don't think we should, but I think that the NATO countries should.
Okay,
Absolutely.
pause it.
You know who else?
And that's in a very important statement going into next week's negotiations because he's going to try to hand this war off to Europe. Either they're going to take it or they're not. And he's going to say, this is the negotiated deal. You're either going to take it or you're going to step up and pay militarily. If they pay militarily, their counterpoint to Trump is, well, we'll put 5% if you put 5%. And Trump is saying, no, we've invested for too long. It's yours now. You either take it and own it or we're going to come to a negotiated deal with Russia, I believe.
It was a low payer, just about the lowest, a place called Canada. Because Canada said, why should we pay when the United States will protect us free? They've been right about that.
Documents we obtained through access to information research funded by your donations at rebelinvestigates.com expose the truth. The Department of National Defense is sinking $4.27 billion into decarbonizing the military. That's nearly half of the new defense spending that Prime Minister Mark Carney announced. And the cost per ton of CO2 reduced, a laughable, wasteful $472,
Okay.
whatever that
That's
means.
good for now. We will keep up on this story. And I'm also going to say, say you're going to go to war with somebody like China or Russia or whoever NATO may go to war with, Canada is part of NATO. If these non-green countries invest $8 billion and then Canada invests $8 billion, but half is going to green energy infrastructure projects and not the actual military, that means they're going to be outspent by their adversaries by double, even if they have the same investment.
And go support Rebel News as well.
Yeah.
We like them, but yeah, it is ridiculous that now they're just plainly using it as an excuse to not have to actually spend or do anything worthwhile with the military or even be militarily capable.
This is going to come out in the negotiations between America and Canada with this tariff deal that's currently going on. Rebel News just kind of uncovered these documents through the Freedom of Information Act. I'm sure intelligence in the United States is all over this right now, and the fact that it is public now is going to be brought up in these tariff hearings. And it's not looking good for them. It is looking a lot better for Mexico, who's in the kind of the same situation, but one partner is willing to cooperate while the other is willing to make it look like they're cooperating, but behind the scenes, they're doing everything they can to sabotage the deal.
Yes. Should we watch what the UK is doing now?
Yeah, this was a funny story I had seen this morning, and I just had to grab it. This was insane, and this is not against the law. So I'm just going to make that clear right now. Honking at somebody that's jogging isn't against the law. People might not like it, but if they want it to make it against the law, they need to make it against the law. The police officer at the end of the video even states that fact. Okay.
So from Ollie London, UK Police Department sends undercover female officers to go running to help crack down on men honking their horns and catcalling female joggers. And because it's in the UK, I will venture a guess. It's a specific type of men that's catcalling these women. Because the other ones have
Oh,
been.
and yeah, there was another breaking story we
castrated.
didn't grab, but an immigrant man went into a woman's shelter. He was ran out by one of the women in the shelter. The police were then called. They said he didn't break any laws, so they're not going to arrest him. And the rumor is they're currently arresting the woman that ran the migrant out. That's not confirmed yet. That's kind of why we're waiting to tomorrow to report on the story, but it does relate to this somewhat.
In the UK, it happened.
Yeah, in the UK.
These women aren't friends out for a run. They're actually undercover police officers taking to the streets in Surrey as part of a new operation trying to stop people catcalling and harassing female runners.
We get honked at, the staring, the hanging out of the window just to look at us, and it's so prevalent.
And police teams are ready to intervene the moment the officers are beeped at, followed or shouted at, pulling people over.
You can pause it. And they're wearing tight, skimpy shorts and things of this nature. I understand that's fine in Western countries, but if they don't want to be catcalled or yelled at, maybe they should wear a little bit more clothes.
And I mean, here they're doing it on purpose. They're doing it so the men do it so they can stop it. But even the fact that she was like, oh, it's so prevalent, it's so horrible. You're a police officer. You're supposed to feel that way.
Those kind of behaviours may not be criminal offences in themselves, but they still need to be addressed. And of course, the people that are likely to...
What does it mean that these are not criminal offenses, but they need to be addressed? Are we addressing things that are not laws, but we want to magically make laws?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you want to make it illegal and have something on the books you can charge somebody with. I don't even know what's kind of going on here. They're pulling people over for catcalling, which is legal in the UK.
And there's a lot of other things that you could try to avoid in the UK that would be more worthwhile than this, but...
Oh, look at that. Our volume is working. Perfect.
Do you want to go to the story?
Yeah, let's go to the... let's actually, read a little bit about it here.
So, from The Independent, undercover female police pose as joggers to catch catcallers. Surrey police said street harassment was a significant worry for women and girls. Again, I mean, if they're not focusing on who's doing the harassing or what profile they have, they're just saying, oh, men are all bad, they're all the same. Undercover police are posting as joggers in a bid to crack down on street harassment and catcalling.
Okay, and first of all, I see, like, we used to live in Vancouver. There used to be gay guys in, like, really tight outfits, no shirts on, and other gay guys would catcall them, and women would catcall at these guys as well. So, like... if it's against the law, it's against the law. I don't know if they're trying to say it's harassment, but the police officer in the video said it's not against the law.
So in a bid to crack down harassment and catcalling, Surrey police are sending female officers clad in civilian jogging gear on runs in key locations around the county as part of new tactics designed to tackle harassment against runners. The force said they recognized the issue was a significant worry for women and girls in the area, labeling it as unacceptable. The campaign has seen support. Crews accompany female officers who have volunteered to take part from a distance, ready to swoop in if the officers experience catcalling or harassment.
Yeah, and I would be very interested to see who they're trying to target here. A lot of people may think it's immigrants they're trying to target. I would kind of necessarily disagree. They have a two-tiered policing system over there, and maybe something like this could alter the statistics. If they go to primarily, say, traditional UK neighborhoods with permanent citizens, they can up the amount of harassment cases going on against certain races or individuals, and maybe they want to seem like it's less of an issue in immigrant communities.
So like to mess around with the statistics?
Yeah.
Maybe.
I mean, it definitely could. You pick something that not a lot of charges are even brought up. I don't think women actually report harassment a lot because they think it's going to be hard to prosecute, which it probably is. The police see that there's not a lot of cases filed, so just a few cases. If they get 100 or 200 cases, it could be a huge increase. And they could say, oh, there's a 300% increase amongst white men in the UK. Mm-hmm. It doesn't say, in the UK, articles typically aren't going to put race in there, so...
But yeah, it's ridiculous, and it's... I do agree with your theory that it's probably to fudge statistics around and change them.
And we recently seen that happen in Washington, D.C. They're saying it's the lowest crime rate ever, but citizens are starting to stand up and say, no, it's not. I got carjacked. 2 of my friends got carjacked. The news reporter said that on the news today, and she was a liberal. A lot of liberals are standing up and say, oh, I actually like this policy. Okay, let's go into the next article here. And that's going to be GE Appliances, a big investment.
From the AP, GE Appliances shifts more production to U.S. as part of a $3 billion investment.
And maybe we can read about this, but I would suspect that maybe GE had plants in Mexico.
GE Appliances plans to shift production of refrigerators, gas ranges, and water heaters out of China and Mexico as part of a more than $3 billion investment to expand its U.S. operations in Kentucky, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, and South Carolina. The investment, the second largest in the Louisville-based company's history, is expected to add more than 1,000 jobs while ramping up domestic production and modernizing plants in the next 5 years.
Yeah, this will be very interesting. I mean, it's a large investment to build a factory in Mexico. I don't know if they would necessarily shut down the factory in Mexico or maybe make cheaper products for different regions in the world. I know the U.S. standards for a lot of electrical devices are going to have to be green, so maybe they need to be made in modern factories. The non-modern equipment that they want for South America regions or Central regions, I would suspect to still be made in the Mexican plant. That being said, these tariffs are working. The investments are coming in. And you're going to see within, I would say, right around the midterm times, statistics should start to show that. I was expecting a much more broader drop-off and an economic hurt. Trump has really juggled this very well so far.
And hello, Walker. How are you?
Good to see you.
Walker says, Guy, what do you think of the new 120th comedy episode between the U.S. and Venezuela?
The
120th comedy episode between the U.S. and Venezuela.
Yeah, it's interesting because
Maduro.
Trump put the $50 million reward on Maduro. Maduro said back to him that he's going to put a $50 million reward on anybody that puts out the Epstein files, implying that Trump is in those. That is a sensitive topic for Trump. But I was talking to some people this weekend, and this is much like what happened in his first term. He applied a ton of pressure to Maduro through mercenary military means, and then he started a negotiation process quite near the end of his first term. They almost had negotiated immunity for Maduro, his family, a lot of his generals, and citizenship into the United States if he would just step down or somewhere in the a different part of the world. These negotiations took place in Mexico City. This was talked about by the former CIA director under Trump, who came to CPAC in Mexico.
Interim FBI director, I believe.
CIA.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
That being said, this looks like, again, he's starting to apply pressure, a $50 million bounty on Maduro. This is going to really trigger a lot of mercenary organizations like the one Eric Pierce owns. I believe it's XY. They keep changing the name to avoid prosecution for different crimes. But he's going to start applying pressure through mercenary means, just like he did in his first term, and then he's going to want to spark a negotiation or pick those negotiations back up where he started.
But do you think they'll have even a chance to try to get him?
Oh, definitely. I mean, Trump is doing strategical strikes on Iran and other places. He would have loved to privately put a ton of pressure on Maduro internally and then negotiate for him to step down. They already have a puppet leader that they say is the actual leader of Venezuela, which isn't, but that actually provides an interim leader if Maduro does step down. I don't think the people would necessarily accept him, but at least it's somebody interim while they have another election for somebody else.
And we know how elections work over there, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't necessarily say that because I investigated the last Venezuelan election, and there was over 50 countries that were involved in monitoring the election, and it was much more above board than a lot of people think. So a lot of people think there was no outside observers. The UN was there along with 50 other countries.
Okay.
I'm not saying it was a fair, free election. I'm just saying I was surprised at how much transparency was put in through the international community.
Or how many of these methods they were trying to
Yeah.
use. And now for DC and the White House and what they're doing over there. From Hustle, BITCH. We updated my computer and it does weird things. Holy S, the White House will force homeless into shelters or treatment. Refuse, you face fines or jail time. The government deciding on where you live, what treatment you get, and locking you up if you say no.
Yeah, this is very concerning to me. Do they need it? Probably yes, but there are a lot of long-term implications to this. Biden was trying to also make a federalized police force with the military. He had started that ball rolling. It didn't go through. There was a lot of pushback. Trump is doing it, no problem here. And he's doing it by saying we're going to clean up the streets of Washington, D.C. He can then expand that into other states that are going to be very compliant, like the red states. Once they have the statistics back that it's working, he'll try to push it into blue states. The problem is not necessarily cleaning up the streets with the military. The concern is setting the precedents for this federalized, potentially military police force that can be expanded on a federal level to police the United States. And although you may agree with a lot of the reasons it's happening, and right now I actually do agree with the reasons, it's a consolidation and an escalation of power when it comes down to force doctrine. You can't get higher than implementing the military on your citizens. And if the Democrats do take over, that consolidation will already have taken place. The military will already be in place. And then the reasons they're going to have the military arresting people, or the things they're going to want to focus in on, might not be homelessness and crime. The Democrats might switch to something else like hate speech or God knows what.
And it's also using that higher order thinking that we always talk about of, okay, right now you like the policy, but what would happen if eventually, like same with the people that are all about the hate speech laws and censoring speech, what happens when maybe, if, democracy continues, the other side gets on and now they can implement those same laws that now have been put in place against you.
Yeah, and I would admit right now, the conservatives are looking strong in the United States. I actually like what he's implementing the policies for and think it needs to be done, but it's not worth setting that precedent and having this federalized force that can then be used by our opponents when they come in, because we've seen how authoritarian the Democrats were last time, and I can only imagine what they would use a federalized military police force for. We can see kind of like what happened in the UK and what's happening in the EU. I think the same thing would happen in the United States under the Democrats if that happened. Also, like the conservative base is right now dividing into two camps, kind of the J.D. Vance camp and the Steve Bannon camp. It's the America First camp, and then kind of like the Israeli America Alliance camp.
And also, we saw something very similar.
Sorry, I didn't finish that thought. So if you have this division amongst the conservatives where the vote divides, or people kind of stay home because they don't know who to vote for, this kind of gives a segue for the Democrats if they can somehow find a candidate that's reasonable. Right now, they have nobody, but 3 years is a long time. Sorry.
I was going to say, we kind of saw something similar happen actually in Alberta, in Canada, a few years ago. I reported on it. It's on our other channel when it used to be in English, about how Premier Daniel Smith also wanted to start, locking people up or offering them treatment, but not giving, just going to full force against them. I don't know how they were planning to do it, but we also spoke out against it because you never know where those policies that are very, limiting on liberty in general could go.
And you can also just at any time they can declare a state of emergency, and then they already have this federalized police force in place. What happens if they they start implementing digital IDs and then start implementing checks on the spot, things of this nature? It's crazy where it can go. I would just be very cautious. I would be more in favor of them just putting a ton of money into the police force they already kind of have and having them implement the laws they already have, because it's much easier to kind of undo that.
Yes. Should we watch? What's her name?
And I know a lot of people do agree with this, and I can see why people would agree with this. I'm just saying.
And again, we lived in Vancouver, so we understand this
Think
problem.
long term, and the Conservatives in Canada were supposed to win that election by a landslide, and I've seen how an election can fall apart. So.
The Metropolitan Police Department, with the support of the new federal agencies who have been surging on the streets of the District of Columbia, are going to enforce the laws that are already on the books here in Washington, D.C. For far too long, these laws have been completely ignored, and the homelessness problem has ravaged the city. So D.C. Code 22-1307 and D.C. Municipal Regulation 24-100 give the Metropolitan Police Department the authority to take action.
Okay, and pause it here. Okay, and that's interesting. Like, yeah, the laws are already in the books, just have the police enforce it. Why are we making a federal police force or a potential federal police force here that they can then expand? Just empower the police to do their jobs and give them more investment. There was one more thing I was going to say. Oh, yeah, it's very interesting that they're saying laws are already on the books, so it's kind of calming to the general public. Yeah, we just need to implement the laws. You're going to do it with a military force. And imagine how many other laws are on the books that they can say, well, these are already on the books, so it's okay to start enforcing these. There's a lot of old laws that are on the books that necessarily shouldn't be on the books.
And it's not saying that there are no problems with homelessness, with addiction, etc., with all these issues that we know are ravaging cities in Canada, in the States. But again, like measure up to where the power could lead to if it was in the wrong hands.
Yeah,
or in the right hands even.
And even if they do clean up the streets and then withdraw the power, now the precedent has been set and the model has been set for a Democratic president to do whatever he wants when he gets in, kind of along the same lines, but going after a different group of people rather than homeless people.
When it comes to homeless encampments. So homeless individuals will be given the option to leave their encampment, to be taken to a homeless shelter, to be offered addiction or mental health services, and if they refuse, they will be susceptible to fines or to jail time. Again, these are pre-existing laws that are already on the books. They have not been enforced.
Yeah, they're expanding the definition of what homelessness is as well in a lot of states, even Democratic states. A lot of people are becoming homeless, so they're buying RVs, used RVs, and then parking them. And a lot of cities are saying you can only park in one spot for 2 hours. If you park for more than that, this is in a lot of cities in California. I was watching a documentary on it the other day. So they're starting to classify people that live in RVs as homeless. It's a very strange method they're trying to use, but there's too many people living in RVs, they think, in a lot of these cities, and it's bringing down real estate value. So if you start doing something like this and then you start classifying people potentially that live in RVs as homeless, this could go really awry.
Mm-hmm. And for me, I mean, I understand it. Even when we were living in Vancouver, at the beginning, one of the ideas it was like, well, why don't they just either put them in jail, put them back into reopen the mental institutions, or help them with the addiction issues they have. But then if you think about it a little bit further, how do they classify who gets to go to these treatments, who gets to get picked up from the street? What does homeless even mean? Same with hate speech. What is hate speech?
What happens if you want to go to the hospital for treatment or a homeless shelter? What are the regulations that you have to comply with in the homeless shelter or the medical institution? Are you going to be forced to take a jibby jab to get in? Are you going to be forced to other medical treatments? Yeah, right now you probably wouldn't, but if they wanted to start instituting that, this could get dystopian and authoritarian at some point. Mm-hmm. It seems good on the surface, but you need to look at the long-term measures here. I do think there is a problem with drug use and homelessness on the street, but be very careful how far and how broad you want to make these laws.
Mm-hmm. And so yes, White House says homeless people in D.C. will be forced into shelters or put in jail. Advocates say that should terrify everyone. And it's, again, the thinking a little bit further other than, oh, this is a great idea because it's annoying me right now. Imagine what would happen if it was you at some point.
Because I asked you about this because the story had came up and you said, oh, that's a great idea. And I said, but here's the long-term possible implications.
And then I remember the Alberta story as well, where we had already spoken about how it was not actually a good idea if you kind of take it to its final conclusion.
Well, and then they started providing the MAID program in Canada. That's medical assisted in ending of a person. And what happens if they implement similar laws here and then force everybody into homeless shelters and really start pushing this?
Mm-hmm. So one day after warning people experiencing homelessness to move out of Washington, D.C. immediately, Donald Trump said the federal government will begin forcibly removing encampments that have turned the city into a wasteland. The city's Metropolitan Police Department, now under the Trump administration's control for at least 30 days, is giving the city's unhoused population the option to either enter a shelter or substance abuse and mental health treatment or go to jail, according to the White House. The homelessness problem has ravaged the city, and it has ravaged a lot of other cities, and it's a huge problem that for the longest time nobody was even trying to fix or do something about. White House Press Secretary
There is
Caroline Leavitt.
there is also another side to this story. Washington, D.C. is a federalized district. It's not a state into itself, but the police force, it's very strange, but is controlled very politically by Democrats within Washington, and it's like 95% Democrats that live in Washington, D.C. So by federalizing this thing, he's really taking a lot of power away from the progressive wing of politics in the United States. So there is a political intention for this, a big political intention for this. It's not just homeless.
But if they refuse, they will be susceptible to fines or jail time. Administration's latest actions follow a series of executive orders and campaign pledges that criminalize homelessness, making it easier for law enforcement to punish people who are forced to live on the streets. And while this is a point a lot of people and advocates do make in Vancouver, we do know, and with a lot of homelessness situations in general, sorry, I almost choked. We do know, sorry. We do know a lot of people do choose to live that way because it is their choice, quote unquote. I mean, when they become violent or a burden upon society, then something should be done about it. But a lot of people do say, when given the option, because there are rules and like stuff they have to follow, like rules they have to follow if they decide to go to a homeless shelter or they decide to go to treatment, a lot of people just decide not to.
And you also have to realize, like, right now the economy is doing great and Donald Trump's doing fantastic. And I have been a big supporter of Trump for a long time, from when we lived in Canada to now here in Mexico. But even that being said, what happens if something goes wrong with the economy? Let's say this tariff thing doesn't work out for some reason. You have a worst case scenario rather than a best case scenario, which is kind of happening now. And the economy, let's just say, falls apart, or not even under Trump, but by a future administration. Say the economy falls apart and you have millions of people that are homeless, maybe living in RVs and things like this, and now you want to round them all up, put them in shelters. Well, what happens if you don't have enough shelters, and then you're forcing medical treatment on these people? I mean, a lot of things could happen by instituting this kind of power into the federal government.
And we do know treatment also doesn't really work if the person isn't willingly going into it. So it might actually exacerbate and make the problem worse, or make mental health issues worse for people, not that mental illnesses worse for people as well.
And I will say I had once in my life had stayed in a homeless shelter before in Florida, and it was actually rather nice, and it was there, and there was a lot of families that had stayed there as well, and just a very diverse group of people. There was 3 meals a day. It was very good meals. It was actually Christian charities that would come in and work with the government and cook these meals and make everything. There was a gym there. It was actually fairly good. I mean, it was nothing super luxurious, but just provide these things and then let people know that they're there and how they can get them, even if they want to go there for a few days. Do not force them into these places like they're jails or institutions.
But then there is the issue on the other side of the violence, the lawlessness, the trash that's just everywhere now. We've seen homeless encampments in Vancouver.
When people do violence, arrest them for the violent crimes, and then that kind of gets them off of the streets. Start enforcing the laws for the violent people.
And that's also it.
And I do understand, and you do need to provide homeless shelters, but make it an option. A lot of people will take the shelters, not everybody, but a lot of people, and it won't be an epidemic anymore. It would just be a few homeless people here or there if they can provide the services for the people. And I know that's a kind of a liberal view, but it's because I've lived a very diverse life.
Interesting life.
And I've seen, interesting life and seen some things.
And for me also in Vancouver, I used to make the comparison all the time. And a lot of stuff has happened to me with encounters, let's just say, with people on the streets, homeless people with addictions that have spat on me, have chased me down, needles everywhere. I mean, products everywhere, illegal substances everywhere. So that, I mean, living with that and thinking that, oh, you're going to this, modern Vancouver, it's so nice, etc., and seeing how a lot of the policies that were for helping these people have ended up, I mean, that also gives me on the other side. But in the end, once you think about the ramifications and what it could mean if somebody else were to enforce it, you kind of start drawing back and saying, maybe take it a bit slower.
And you don't want to necessarily force a bunch of people into a homeless shelter that maybe don't want to. If they commit a crime, yes, arrest them. But if you force a bunch of people into there, homeless shelters are actually where they distribute and inform people of a lot of services such as food stamps. If you have a family, how you can get an apartment from there. There are a ton of programs in countries like the United States or Canada, much more developed countries, that you want to really get families that are in need, the people that will actually take the help once they're in the homeless shelter, rather than flooding the homeless shelter with a bunch of people that maybe don't want the help, but then the homeless shelter is kind of trying to force it on them, and they're not.
And that could end up worse.
Yeah, they're not actually going to maximize the help they're going to take, and they're going to end up back on the street anyway.
And speaking of substances and Trump, from PBS News, will Trump change federal MJ policy? Here's what to know.
And I haven't read this. This headline popped up today, and I know it was a little bit of an older article from August 12th, but I thought we would educate ourselves with it.
That's from yesterday. So President Donald Trump is taking a new look at reclassifying the green plant as a less dangerous substance in a move that could nudge the federal government closer to an approach already embraced in many states. Trump said Monday that he hopes to decide in the coming weeks about whether to support changes to the way this is regulated. The renewed focus on this comes more than a year after former President Joe Biden's administration formally proposed reclassifying it. No decision was made before Biden left office. Meanwhile, many states have already gone further than the federal government by legalizing the recreational use of it for adults or allowing it for
and I think this is
medical purposes.
I think this is important, especially because there's so much overcrowding in the prison system, and if you start putting people in jail for weed crimes, the prisons can't even handle the capacity as they are now. If they do something like this and stop prosecuting people for marijuana crimes, you do have a lot more rooms in your jail, especially if they're potentially throwing homeless people in jail now.
But at the same time, I would say with this substance in particular, a lot of people think it's a lot more harmless than it is. And there are a lot of people today that are, also addicted to it and don't know how to get off of it. And it's, not to recriminalize it, but maybe to educate or to tell people it's not as harmless as most people have.
Well, I agree.
Understood of it.
It can be harmful, but we can't have a nanny state. And I'm seeing so many things in the news, because we do this every day, where they're saying certain video games are no-go for adults now. And we're just talking like the new Grand Theft Auto. They're trying to ban for adults because it's not appropriate content. Mm-hmm. They're wanting to monitor every phone call over 10 minutes in the UK now. We're making a complete nanny state on so many levels. At a certain point, you have to let adults be adults and make decisions for themselves. If they end up with addiction issues or they end up creating a violent crime, you have to have laws for that or help for that.
But at the same time, I think a lot of people have reached that point of desperation, and there's also a lack of, societal cohesion where people understand. I think a lot of people have lost sense of what's good and what's bad, what's moral, what's immoral, where the lines are, where the, law even is.
Yeah, but I'm not their dad, and you shouldn't be enforcing saying no weed.
No, not from the
weed
government.
Weed is not a bad. Is that of all the drugs, weed is far less harmful than alcohol, and alcohol is legal.
Yes.
So I would be an advocate of maybe legalizing it, but it is a gateway drug, and I'll be the first to admit that. Mm-hmm. But I would say alcohol is far worse. So if you're going to make weed illegal, you're going to have to make alcohol illegal. And we've seen what happened the last time the United States tried to do that. It didn't work out so well.
No.
So, people have to be adults at a certain point, and it's something that does grow out of the ground.
And I don't think the government should be responsible for doing it, but society and people as a whole should care. Everybody has stopped caring about each other and caring about the future of either the country or the world as a whole. And I think it's led to a lot of the issues we see nowadays that we didn't used to see before. And we talk a lot also about the loss of religion and the loss of fundamental morals and values. And I think a lot of it stems from that. But I'm not saying the government should do it, but I'm saying people do need to learn even what responsibility is and how to take it and why it's important also to take it if you're an adult. The dog.
She's chewing on a cord. That's the first time she's ever did that.
The dog's eating a cord.
Hold on, I gotta go.
Okay. She's a... I said we should get her a toy, and Guy said no. Walker, I'll read you for now, and I'll interact with you. So Walker says, I'm against the legalization of substances, but I really see it as becoming more and more inevitable. People are getting more and more into substances. And then he also says, but I really see that the government doesn't run any campaigns to prevent people from consuming these substances. And they have in the past. I mean, here in Mexico, I remember the whole Vives y Sustancias. In the US, they had the whole, what was that called? It was like an acronym that people had shirts. It was big during the 90s and 80s. Okay. Well, Walker, if you remember that. But even those programs have kind of also faded away. I've noticed.
I'm actually in favor of liberal. I'm a little bit more in the favor of liberalizing weed and other drugs as well as alcohol, but I'm also in favor of drug testing for jobs. So for a lot of careers, I think it's fair, even if a substance is legal, to say if you, as a point of employment for this job, we don't want you to have you do this. I've had plenty of jobs like that in the past, whether it was mining or other jobs that you had to take a drug test on a regular basis. And I think that's absolutely fine.
The DARE program. I figured it out.
So I kind of land on both sides here. But I do understand if you get too liberal with this, we've seen the effects in places like Vancouver.
Yeah.
It's not good.
Where it was completely decriminalized, 100%. And again,
well, no, it's not the fact that weed was decriminalized. It's weed,
everything was decriminalized.
It's the fact that weed was the gateway drug that they used for decriminalization. Then they say, okay, now we're going to decriminalize this drug and then this drug. And next thing you know, it's heroin, crack, cocaine, and it's craziness.
We can't say those words.
So it's not just a liberalization on where, well, I'll just say, the government uses one as a stepping stone to go to the next decriminalization of the next thing.
But also we have seen, and I mean, living here in Mexico, but also having lived in Vancouver, we do see a lot of these substances that hook people and turn them into addicts used almost as a weapon, either intentionally or non-intentionally, to, like call a population basically. And that has happened in the States. We've seen it happening in Canada. I don't know how many ODs I saw almost per week in Vancouver just living downtown. And it is a very specific target. I mean, there's a lot of desperation. There's a lot of people that have no purpose in life. And as someone, and I mean, I speak it openly, as someone who's been sober for 9.5 years, I am very staunchly against substances and staunchly against alcohol because I understand the effects of it and where it can lead and the dangers. And I know a lot of people who are also sober who have harrowing stories. And it is possible to get out of it almost, I mean, with support, but not through the government, but through other programs as well.
I would actually support churches and other organizations like that and a revitalization of that into people's life. So it's a natural progression of people just naturally don't want to drink or do those things. This is not to say all religious people don't want to do those, but it's just to say at least provides a moral foundation and really it provides future goals of having a family and things like this, which a lot of people aren't doing these days.
And we do see like Gen Z turning towards the church as well. Yes, I see you tapping. Walker has a comment.
Okay.
Walker says...
Sorry, we have like a ton of stories today. That's why I was tapping.
Walker says, there's a book called A General History of Substances by Antonio Escojotado. I haven't read it, but in theory it mentions that substances wouldn't make any changes to society because we lived with them legally in the past.
I disagree. We have lived
but
legal.
Not with the...
Hold on. We've lived legally in the past, and when they were legal here, or not here, but in the United States, there was a really solid religious foundation and support groups. So people, even though everything was legal, people didn't really want to turn to them or want them.
No, not as many.
as it becomes much more legal in a lot of Western countries, we're having a huge problem because there's no religious base or foundation for people to really rely on.
Well, there's no morality and no values and no stigma. In Vancouver, one of the big things I was very against was destigmatizing, addiction. I don't think that helps. The stigma helps because it helps people know it's wrong. If young people don't know it's wrong, then they'll do it and don't think it's a big deal, especially if the government is encouraging you to. But let's move on to US. And China extend trade truce another 90 days, easing tension between world's largest economies.
Yeah, so this is big. This is just another 90 days, but they need this 90 days. The United States continues. They're running out of rare earth minerals right now in a lot of their electronics, so a lot of their production and stuff like this. So they just need to keep going with this, and hopefully eventually a bigger deal kind of emerges. They're securing other deals while they keep giving this one a 90-day extension. There's a good possibility that Trump doesn't actually want a deal with China. He wants to create all the other deals first. If he says he doesn't have a deal with China or he's not going to make a tariff deal with China, that's going to create a mass panic in the economy. So a 90-day extension is great.
And it says President Donald Trump extended a trade truce with China for another 90 days Monday, at least delaying once again a dangerous showdown between the world's two biggest economies. Trump posted on his Truth Social platform that he signed the executive order for the extension and that all other elements of the agreement will remain the same. Beijing at the same time also announced the extension and to the tariff pause. And is it that it's Mexico and China the only ones that got the extension, or is there other countries that also got an extension?
Yeah, Mexico and China did, but also China and Canada were the only ones that had counter tariffs. So it's very interesting to watch these three countries. Obviously, China's the power player, and they have a lot of things that the United States needs, mainly rare earth minerals for their military. The U.S. needs that for their military manufacturing and a lot of their sensitive electronics and just their general more technical manufacturing that happens in the States. They desperately need those, and there's no other country that can provide them in mass. So China's kind of got them by the balls on that point, but they don't have much other leverage over the United States, I would say, overall. But that is a big point of contention. And I think he's just wants to keep things, keep going with China while he secures all of these other deals. As he secures more and more deals with other countries, it does put a lot more pressure on China.
And now moving on to crazy British Columbia, where we used to live. So Drea Humphrey from Rebel News says, this is the start of how you will own nothing and be happy. The Supreme Court of British Columbia just ruled that the Cowichan tribes now have Aboriginal title over hundreds of acres of private lands in Richmond. And that is close to Vancouver. It's a smaller city.
Yeah, there's hundreds of millions of dollars of infrastructure on that land as well. So there is like big oil storage facilities for the airport on that land, warehouses, there's residential houses on that land. They're already giving up 1.2 million acres to the indigenous tribes. This happened about a month ago. The federal government did that in BC as well. Now this is more in the city, so this is really starting to impact the private sector and stuff like this. Yeah, you're going to own nothing, and they're going to tell you to be happy about it at the end of the day. And when this indigenous stuff started happening and they did this land acknowledgements for the past 10 years, nobody's seen the threat of it. But they were just getting you to accept the fact that you were the invaders, you took their land, and it's their land, and we're going to have to give it back.
And then you owe reparations to.
And now people are literally losing their homes to these tribes. And if the tribe allows you to continue to live on that land, you're now subject to that tribe's laws as well.
Because they do have a different kind of policing system. And also with the lies that were told about the mass grave, like with the mass grave hoax. And this was also used as an excuse to not only give funds, but also to pass certain laws like this. I mean, it's still being used as an excuse for the power grab that's really coming from the government, not so much I'm guessing it's not really fully coming from the tribe. It's more the government wanting to use them as well to do these kind of power grabs.
Yeah, and we're also going to see a lot of these tribes are extremely corrupt. The money funnels right to the top, and it stays in the hands of really just a few families within there, and it often doesn't trickle down. I know because I've seen it firsthand with friends and tribes within Canada. That being said, it would be if they keep giving this land away like millions of acres like they've been doing in Canada, you're going to have a real portion of the population wanting to be part of the 51st state, because even if they do become their own individual country, there is going to be a war amongst who owns that land within that little country. Say Alberta, the tribes are going to say it's ours, the people are going to say it's theirs, and there's no way to really force it because there's no real enforcement arm. You're going to need a bigger power like the Canadian government or the U.S. government to come in and kind of resolve that.
And it could also be a strategy to stop that from happening by saying, well, if you go and separate, who's going to mediate between you and who really owns the land?
It's not to mediate. I think they're going to say you're not going to be able to take that land and secure that land for Alberta if Alberta does separate. That's going to really force Alberta into the arms of the Americans if it does happen. So, okay, let's go into the next story here.
And from Better Dwelling, will Canadians lose their homes? BC rules First Nations own 6% of Richmond.
And this is a major industrial city. It's right next to Vancouver. It's very well built up. So
the lawsuit was, The BC Supreme Court has ruled Cowichan tribes still hold title to 1,846 acres of prime Richmond land in Greater Vancouver. The longest trial in Canadian history only targeted government-held lands, but may have a much wider impact, setting a precedent that could reshape property law. Cowichan First Nations claim nearly 6% of Richmond, BC. The lawsuit was launched by...
Let's pause this for a minute. There was actually 3 tribes involved with this. 2 other tribes were suing the original tribe that won, saying it was their land. I mean, if you go back far enough, there's always land with somebody else's land. We're living in a society now where people have ownership over houses and stuff like this. So to uproot thousands of people and give it back to a tribe that hasn't really been living there, I think is a little bit ridiculous. And if this happens, it just sets the precedent in Canada. This is now going to happen over and over again. It's going to cause so many problems.
And it's a destruction of property rights. And part of being a free individual in a free society is being able to own property.
But they've done these land acknowledgements for so long, had so much propaganda on this. People are generally happy with this kind of outcome.
Or are completely lulled to it and don't understand the implications, or don't want to understand the implications, because then it would be too much cognitive dissonance.
Same thing will happen here. I could definitely see this kind of precedent happening in Mexico City, because right now they're trying to say the indigenous people are different than these people, and the tribe used to own parts of Mexico City, so it should now be given back to them.
All of Mexico City. But
that's the point.
but then this goes back to Israel, Gaza as well. Like, where does this leave that conflict and those kinds of conflicts as well? But the lawsuit was launched by First Nations groups to assert ownership over, including privately held and submerged lands, about 5.8% of Richmond,
And
BC.
also, this also has the underlying socialist narrative that can be strung along if they can create a war between the civilians and these native tribes, and then the Canadian government, and the Canadian government can eventually come in and say, well, nobody owns the land. There is no more private property. Everybody will be assigned houses, and this is how it will work. You own nothing, and you will be happy. So
they argue the exclusive occupation of the territory predating British assertion of sovereignty, with no treaty, purchase, or surrender demonstrating transfer. The First Nations group explicitly targeted Crown or city-held lands. Crown is owned by the state. And the ruling notes they were not seeking the court to invalidate or annul private property titles. But still...
Okay, let's go into the next.
It is a bad precedent to set. And Walker says it's very weird. It's a very weird last name. Es Hurtado. He is Spanish. Maybe there's a common last name. It is pronounced Escotado. Okay, take a look at his videos. He's a titan of liberalism. Okay, thank you.
Well, why did he say to check him out?
Because that was the guy that said that. What did he say? That. In theory, it mentions that substances wouldn't make any changes to society because they've been legally used before. But I mean, we also have to consider, especially now, a lot of these substances have been hyper changed and the structures and the molecular structures and the chemistry of the drug.
We're living in these mega cities and everything else with a lack of religion. I mean, take religion out and you put mass drug use and this degradation of moral values. You have a real problem there. I mean, having every drug even legalized in a religious society, I think there's boundaries put on it just by the moral values of the general community.
But they weren't also at the level that they are now in terms of how powerful they are, how fast they can end you, etc. But speaking of ending fast, from The Guardian, Sheinbaum, president of Mexico, rejects U.S. invasion after Trump orders military to target Mexican cartels. Mexico's president says there will be no invasion. It's absolutely off the table after news reports of the order.
Yeah, and we covered this the other day, but if you can go to the X now, because we covered this exact article, maybe we'll go into it again in a moment, but...
So from the New York Times World, breaking, and this was from a few days ago, President Trump has secretly signed a directive to the Pentagon to begin using military force against certain Latin American bad people.
Yeah, and she's saying the U.S. military is not going to come into Mexico. Yeah, the intelligence agencies are obviously already here working behind the scenes. They're just not, it's not the actual ground force that's coming in. So it looks like behind the scenes that she's probably cooperating with the U.S. military, much like the Ukrainians cooperated as well. So just because they're saying the U.S. military is not here, I wouldn't believe that for even a second. This is one of their huge goals. Their blind spot is Mexico if a major conflict breaks out with either Russia, China, or any other country. So that's why he's securing the sub. I really think Trump's getting ready for war, even if it's not him. Maybe it's the person after him. Everything he's doing is preparing the United States for war. When you do prepare like that, a lot of times your adversaries will back off because they're like, "Oh no, you're prepared." That being said, they want to clean up Mexico in a big way, not only for economic and financial investments, but there's a lot of reasons. We've kind of gone over those in the past.
Yeah, and I say, and I'll continue to say, and will continue to say, it's not a good idea for that to happen, at least for Mexico and Mexicans living in Mexico, but with Sheinbaum, and I think the way that the negotiations are being done is she says something like outwardly to the people, and then, I mean, behind the scenes, there's clearly some kind of deal going on, because otherwise, how did the 90-day pause on the tariffs happen? How come now she's really cooperating and even sending up, I think it was 26 members of these organizations to the states to be tried over there? And what is the state holding over not just her and not just her current, like the current party that's in government, Morena, and the ex-president, but everybody else that has any sort of power within Mexico? I think there's a lot more the states has been able to leverage to say, you listen to me, you're going to do what I tell you.
Yeah, and we might have a little bit of radical views on this, saying we don't believe the U.S. military should come in. I would say it's maybe a 50-50 split in Mexico when you ask around. A lot of people think that this can't be solved by the Mexican government because the cartels are so interlinked with them. It will have to be an outside government like the U.S. government to come in if they ever want to get rid of that. I would say, yeah, it's a half split down here in Mexico. I don't think it's a good idea. I also have very radical views of why I think the cartel is actually necessary for the first time ever in Mexican history, and that's they align with what they want is probably no digital IDs and no digital currency. Because they want to be able to hide their wealth and hide their identities. So this kind of keeps digital IDs and digital currency at bay, even if they do adopt it a bit. I'm sure the U.S. government is working on their digital currency right now, and they're going to force this down the Mexican government's throat. So that's going to allow total control over Mexico.
And it also continues to be a state of sort of freedom through chaos, as unfortunate and sad as that is, but the levels of corruption also, in another sense, allow for other governments more powerful, like the U.S., to come in and say, essentially just grab Mexico by the balls and say, hey, you're going to do what I'm telling you because I know so many things that could completely destroy you. So it becomes a much more controllable state and government in general because of the levels of corruption and like secrecy that has happened for the past 100 years, I'll say.
Yeah, when you have a regular military force and a government force that's completely legitimized, it's easy for very powerful governments to start pulling strings and manipulating a government into doing exactly what they want, whether it's through loans and banking or a million other means. When you have a cartel that's really sharing the power with the government, it is a lot harder to get control over not only the government but over the country in general, because it's a shared power base and the government can use that to their advantage to claim ignorance. Well, I don't have control over them, I don't know what's going on, a million other things. So it's very interesting, the dynamic. Not a lot of countries have extremely powerful cartels like that. So it's a unique situation that Mexico kind of finds themselves in.
But I said the opposite. But yeah, I guess.
Okay.
Because we have to move on because we do still have a lot of stuff to talk about. But from Disclose TV, Ursula von der Leyen, the new European Media Freedom Act permits the arrest of journalists if it's in the public interest. And you would think that arresting any journalist is against the public interest because the public needs information to be a working democracy that's well informed. But
none of this is true. Like what's in the public interest is free and fair elections and democracy. They claim to be for democracy and free and fair elections, yet they're canceling elections, rigging elections. They're doing everything else, and people are speaking out and protesting in these countries, and they're going to say that these protests aren't in the interest of the people, but these protests are coming from the people themselves, and they're going to want to arrest the journalists that are kind of reporting on this.
Mm-hmm.
So
the EU media freedom law allows for journalists' arrests if justified by public interest. The European Media Freedom Act is now in effect across all EU member states. This legislation aims to protect press freedom and the confidentiality of sources. That's like... However, Article 3B and 4C of the Act allow for journalist arrests if justified by a compelling public interest on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, public interest, it's like if you disagree with the government, it's in their interest to say it's in public interest. That's the problem here. And the EU is losing all credibility along with all these countries in within that union, such as the UK, such as Spain, all these, especially in Western Europe, they're doing exactly the opposite of what the citizens want, and they're just saying, shut up and take it.
So they said member states shall not take any of the following measures: detain, sanction, intercept, or inspect media service providers unless it is justified on a case-by-case basis by an overriding reason of public interest. The new law also contains numerous provisions that call for action against alleged disinformation. Again, that word, what does it mean? Same with hate speech, what does it mean? How can they even control or decide what it is? Ursula von der Leyen, EU Commission President, stated a free and independent press is an essential pillar of our democracy. And again, that's moronic because it doesn't make any sense when you put it that way. And at the same time, I was quickly going to say this helps explain also what the notwithstanding clause in Canada is. So there is free speech in Canada, notwithstanding they find a reason to not give you free speech. And now it looks like the EU...
the jibby jab era.
Yes, and now the EU is essentially just doing the exact same thing.
And we're going to go over to RUMBLE now. We got a lot of stories about climate lockdowns and other things happening in the EU, Canada, stuff that may be a little bit too sensitive for YouTube. So we go over to the Green Monster. That's RUMBLE. If you haven't liked or subscribed, please do so. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers so we can monetize this channel. And thank you to everybody that did subscribe on our Spanish channel. We recently reached 10,000 subscribers. So thank you.
Yes. And quickly before we go, Walker says, wow, that's very interesting, but I guess the EU can do it because they're for the good and against the bad, because they're the ones that decide what is good and what is bad. And it's just moronic. They're saying that this is press freedom when they're actually canceling press freedom.
Yeah.
But, so let's go over to RUMBLE. We'll see you over there in a second. Ending this one now. Okay, have to grab the